Welcome back to the Midweek Bible Study. I'm aware that some people might just put their toe in here or there, see a particular chapter and decide to listen to that one. Because we're in the middle of a couple of very controversial chapters, I would really appreciate it if you'd go back a couple of chapters and listen to those lessons first so we don't have to do a whole bunch of review and you can understand what we're talking about. I do not believe that the end times doctrines that are out there, and there are many, all claiming to be the only one and using their verses to prove, I don't believe any of them are salvation issues. I don't believe any of them are where we should specialize and put our focus. Our focus should be on loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves. That should keep us pretty busy because some people out there take a lot of effort to love. So get your energies in the right direction. But people do love the drama. And we've already talked about the first half of this particular discussion. The apostles were saying, look at these beautiful buildings around the temple. And Jesus says there's going to come a time where not one stone will be upon another. That occurred in 70 AD when the Roman general Titus took Jerusalem, and a great slaughter, great starvation, horrible treatment of people. Many hundreds of thousands died, and the Jews were scattered in the great diaspora. Jesus tells us, however, that God has not lost touch with those people. In verse 31, he says, he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. A lot of people grab this one verse, and they'll grab a few verses in Revelation, a couple in Isaiah, a few in Daniel, and they'll ram them all together and they'll claim the doctrine of the rapture, where the good people are going to be just floated right off the planet, and the bad people, best of luck down there for a while. None of that can really be justified by Scripture once you understand when the book was written, how it was written, to whom it was written. It doesn't work. So what about gathering all of these? Well, he does gather us, and he did gather us. Remember, he has just said in Matthew during this final week before the crucifixion that he would love to be like a mother hen, spreading his wings, gathering his chicks so that they could shelter under the wings. But they wouldn't. So all of this is going to happen. But now he says, I'm going to gather all of my people. Now, does that mean, by the way, do you take that literally? Do you think Jesus wants to be a chicken? Of course you don't. We understand metaphor. We understand allegory. We understand symbols. We get that, right? So, what's he talking about? While these Jews are scattered, and please remember that Christians and Jews considered themselves one religion at this stage. They did. Now, there were a lot of Jews that did not accept Christ, but a lot did. And when they did, and these Gentiles were brought in as Christians, Rome looked upon them as Jews. And so as they're scattered, it's not just Jewish people going, it's Christian people who are Jewish and Gentile who are spread all over the world. And in fact, did not Jesus tell them, and he's going to tell them again in a few chapters here, go into all the world. Go, take this message, first to Judea, then to the uttermost parts of the earth. Well, as they are scattered, are they alone? No, God is with them. He has gathered them, though the governments have scattered them. And so it's a comforting thought. While all this horrific stuff is happening, God is not losing track of you. God has not lost you. God still has his wings over you. He knows who his people are. And then he goes further. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. We better pay attention. There was a fig tree incident, if you remember, we just looked at. It just happened. So we better pay attention. As soon as its twigs get tender and the leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it's near, right at the door. He's saying, get your eyes open, pay attention to what's going on. Rome was about to, not at this, when he actually says this, but within a generation, is going to go through a series of upheavals where one emperor after the other, it was a mess. and watch for these things, because when you start seeing the eagles or the vultures gather, that's when you know it's time to get out of Jerusalem. If you look up and you see the abomination of desolation, that they have entered into the temple to sacrifice to their gods, you see the standards of the Roman soldiers. He says, don't go back to get anything, turn and run. Turn and run. A lot of them dead. Josephus mentions that a lot of Christians survived this, that they got out in time, which is rather fascinating. Again, do I believe that the book of Revelation was written to warn them? I used to. When I grew up, my father was very much a preterist. You can look that up. And he didn't make me, he told me to, and I read them. So I guess that is Mead. A bunch of books by E. Wallace Jr. and others who were just absolutely certain that it was almost a matter of faith and salvation, that you had to believe that the book of Revelation was written in the 60s somewhere. Most likely, in other words, before the fall of Jerusalem, and that way the Christians got this book warning them and they got out. Most likely it was written in the 90s. I've seen the number 96 AD written a lot. I'm not sure I would die on that hill, but I don't think they got out because they got Revelation. I think they got out because the story of Jesus saying, when you see these things, get out, was still alive. But regardless, Jesus tells them the time bubble in which all of this is going to take place. He does. Look at here. I tell you the truth. This generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. This generation. Isn't it interesting that when the book of Revelation was written, whenever it was, it keeps saying in those early chapters, this will soon happen. This will shortly come to pass. Nowhere in there does it say, hang on guys, enjoy the book, but it's really written for people in 2024. No, he's talking to them about things that are going to happen to them and shortly thereafter to their kids. And in a spiritualist way, not religion spiritualism, but a spiritual way of taking a look at the book, it does cover that constant conflict between humans wanting to legislate and link arms with government to push forward their faith, and really let go of government and let God be your government. It is that constant blast. And the first book I went through on this series was Revelation. So you can go back, listen to all those lessons. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. This generation will not pass away until all these things have fulfilled. But then he changes. No one knows about that day or hour. Second question. End of the world. Not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son. He's saying, I don't even know when that's going to be, but the Father. Let me talk about this a little bit. Some people try so hard to do the math. They'll go through the 70 weeks and 7 and this of Daniel, and then they put in this weird pause, saying, now in this last week, everything is matching up. In this last week, there's a pause of a couple thousand years. Why? There's no indication that he meant for there to be a pause. Others will count days here, and they'll do all kinds of complicated math, trying to figure out, do the words mean really numbers? And if we times this ruler's name by... Hold on. Nobody knows. I don't think there's a date. I don't think there's a date at all. I don't think God's saying up in heaven, or has said, that let's say December 25th, Christmas of 2024, is the day that Jesus comes back. I don't think that's it. He's saying only the Father knows. Let me explain what I mean. When my daughter was a young teenager, she actually didn't ask the date, which I found fascinating. It was certainly less stress on dad and mom. But had she come up and said, when can I start dating? I would tell her, I'll let you know. I'll know when it's time. When it came time for her to drive, I went to her and I said, you want to get your driver's license? And she said, yes, I do. And so we did the lessons. We got her permit. And when the time came that she qualified to get a license, I think I've told this story before. I drove her down in my car. My wife met us there, surprised her. She didn't know that my daughter didn't know that my wife was coming, her mom. As soon as Kara got her license, we hugged her, we congratulated her. I handed her the keys to my car, and I said, "I'll ride home with your mom. We'll see you when you get back." Now, she was surprised. She didn't know that day had arrived. She said, "Aren't you worried?" And I said, "No, you're a good driver, and I pay an insurance guy to worry about the others." And she's done fantastic, of course. She's a grown woman with her own kids now and continues to be fantastic. The point being, I couldn't have said, "You will be allowed to date the day you turn 16. You will be allowed to date in groups, and then you'll be allowed to go on solo dates October." That there's not a date. It is I'll know when you're ready. Some might be ready earlier. Some might not be ready until later. It's the same with learning to drive. It's the same with committing your life to Christ in baptism. We'll know when you're ready. The Father knows when the time is ready. It doesn't need to be a date. There's no indication in Scripture that there's a particular date. In fact, he even puts it, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man." Now think about that. In the story of the flood, God doesn't say, "Hurry up, because on this date, the rain's starting." No, he just tells him tasks to get done. And then when God decided the time had come, God moved. "For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That's how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken, the other left." And again, people like to grab the rapture doctrine and shove it in here, where once again, the word rapture is not even in the Bible. What's it talking about? God will take one of them. He's going to talk more about this in chapter 25. All right, it's going to take us a while to get there, but we're on our way. One will be taken, the other left. 2 women will be at the grinding at a handmill. One will be taken, the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. I brought that up, this whole thing, to a man once, years and years ago. And of course, he does that little word trick thing. "Oh, we don't know the hour, but we know the kind of signs around the time." Jesus is letting them know there's not really going to be signs of this. Hold on. That's what he's going to do. You ready? "But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would have not let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him." Back in, I think it was 1998 or around there somewhere, a former engineer wrote a book that just took the Protestant evangelical wing of the Christian church by storm. Something like 88 reasons why Jesus was going to come back on this particular date. And it was on the news, it was on billboards, it was on radio stations and talk shows. And it was a huge nothing. And I kept talking to my friends who were so concerned, saying, if you're expecting him, that's not when he's coming. Even, 10, 11 years ago, there were people that were following Jonathan Cahn and some other Messianic rabbis that were writing books about when a red heifer gets born over here and then this happens. And they were in my office terrified about the end of the world was coming. And can't you see all of these signs? And whenever I would say, no, a cow with a certain pigment being born in a certain place is not a sign of it. And they were so disappointed in me. They were so disappointed. They were liquidating assets and trying to figure out what to do with them and maybe move them all into gold before Jesus came back. And I'm not really sure what that was going to do. And they wanted advice on how to, shore up things. And I'm looking at him going, no, if you're looking, he's not coming. He's not coming when you think he's going to come. He's made that very plain. And yet we still have prophecy seminars where people saying, all right, if our guy doesn't get elected, and by the time you see this, somebody got elected and somebody didn't, because this is being recorded in September, and you're going to be right in the middle of November, I think, when you see this one, if you watch it when it's published. He says, you're not going to know. So just live life's command of loving God and loving your neighbor fully, so that whenever it happens, you're ready. You're ready. We had a shooting incident in Nashville several years ago where a man entered a Waffle House and started shooting people with a rifle. And he was eventually disarmed by a man who was unarmed, who jumped him when he was reloading. People were hiding under tables and such, and people were killed. As the police arrived, they have to clear everybody out of the scene. Now, if you've never been around police and don't know how this works, just be aware. Everybody coming out is a suspect. You don't know, even if their hands are up and they've got blood on their face, if they were in on it or not. And so everybody has to be treated as a suspect. And as they're coming out, everybody is being, moved off to respectfully by the police here, but very much a controlled situation. And they ask one man for ID, and he says, okay, sure. And he opens his coat and goes for his wallet. On his belt is a handgun. Now, he has a permit to carry. Tennessee is a shall issue state, and so people have concealed carry permits. But as he did this, and his hand didn't go to the gun, the police officer yelled gun. They pulled their firearms, and the man was panicking. The story came out. He forgot he had it. He hadn't trained. He just bought a firearm, done a couple classes, shot a qualifying mark if that was required, and then carried it. He hadn't trained. He had never made, according to the police officer, here's a quote, he had never made a meaningful draw in his life. That doesn't mean that he hadn't been in a fight. It just means he hadn't trained. And he forgot. He was hiding under a table while the guns are going off. The guy's legs are right in front of him, and he forgot he had a firearm because he hadn't trained. Here's what I'm concerned about, is that we will concern ourselves so much with the end of the world that we don't train loving God, loving our neighbors. It's a training thing. You've got to practice it. It's got to become muscle memory, your spiritual muscle memory, to love one another. It's hard work. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But instead, we argue, we fuss about politics, we fuss about whatever. And then when Jesus does come back, we're going, oh, forgot about all that loving stuff. No. Focus now on what you know. Live a meaningful life so that whenever he comes, you're ready for it. It's never an uh-oh. It is a, oh, welcome. You're so excited. That's the way it should be. So I'll keep preaching. I guess I do that, don't I? So who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It'll be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. In other words, I gave you jobs to do. Let me find you doing that when I come back. I'm not coming back when you expect. Let me find you busy doing what I told you to do. I tell you the truth, Jesus says, he'll put him in charge of all of his possessions. Please remember, Jesus said, if we are faithful over a few things, he will make us rulers over many. We don't really know what that means, but we did look at that in that Hell, Heaven, and a God of Love series, so you might want to look back at that. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, whew, my master is staying away a long time, and then begins to beat his fellow servants. Christians, you can beat people with your mouth and your keyboard. Beat fellow servants, and eat, drink with drunkards, not like Jesus did, to love them, show them compassion, but rather just to forget being Christian. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't know what else Jesus could say. Another way that he could phrase, you won't know when I'm coming. There won't be signs. It'll just happen. And if you're expecting it, it's not then. He did again and again. The Millerites in America were just one of many. Jehovah's Witnesses did this, a whole bunch did. But the Millerites followed a guy named Miller, funny enough, and they sold their properties because he told them he figured out the math when Jesus was coming back. Some of them even got on the rooftops of their homes that they'd be the first to greet Jesus. Didn't happen. And then he set another date, didn't happen. Eventually they became the Seventh-day Adventists, which everyone I've met has been a really good person, so we're not making fun of them at all. But their start was not a good start. It was a very rocky start. The Jehovah's Witnesses made it very plain that Jesus was coming back right early 1900s. And even one of their best-selling books, because they sell their religious books door to door, was Millions Now Living Shall Never Die. If you've got a copy of one of those from the early 1900s, hang on to it, because they have removed that from distribution, and often the lower members don't even know that it ever existed. They even built a house for Jesus to live in, so when he came back, he'd have that. That's sad. And then they really rolled the dice, and they put all of their chips into the 1970s that Jesus was coming back bodily, really for true this time. And he didn't, and they call it the Great Disappointment, and they lost about a third of their membership, much of which has been regained by kind of ignoring all of that and starting over with new populations. So it's just not worth your time. It's not worth our effort to start worrying about the end of time. Instead, be busy. Do good. Now he's going to illustrate this with a parable. Chapter 25. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. They weren't prepared. They didn't do their job. The arrival of a bridegroom back then was a huge event. We have it stood on its head. We have the arrival of the bride is the big thing. And, quite frankly, I don't mind that at all. I think that's beautiful. I think brides are beautiful. But back then, it was the bridegroom coming who protects you, gives you a place, gives you honor and a name. And so understand, these virgins were supposed to go out there to greet someone they were expecting to come there. But some of them were just, not ready. They hadn't gotten around to all that love God, love your neighbor stuff. They hadn't been doing what they had been told to do. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet. The door was shut. Later the others also came. "Sir, sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." You do not know the day or the hour. Once again, people try to get around that by saying, he doesn't say the year bubble. Really? Really? That's what you're going to do to God? He's tried to make it quite plain. Let's go back to this story. I didn't like this story when I was growing up because I thought that the wise virgins should share, because I'd always been told that that's what Christians did and good boys did. So I imagine that good girls should do that too. Share your oil. And they said, no, no. He's not trying to give you wedding etiquette here. He's trying to explain, if you are ready, you're ready. But if you're not, those that are ready can't make you ready. They can't make you ready. Now, if you run off now trying to get ready, it's too late and the doors will be shut. Now, by the way, in the book of Revelation, the Bible makes it plain the gates of heaven don't shut. So he's not trying to be literal here. He's trying to explain to them, be ready. Always be ready. I work with a lot of military, and there are certain groups of military people who have a go bag. And that go bag is in any vehicle they're in. And if they're going into a hotel, they take the go bag with them. It has weapons when allowed by the law. It also has all of their gear, clothes, uniforms, whatever they're going to need. If they get the call, go now, go now. And they don't turn back. They don't make phone calls. Well, I guess with cell phones you can now. But they hop in and they head right toward the designated airport or pickup place. We should have a go bag ready. And what's our go bag? Our life. Our life is our go bag. So we're ready. Whenever we're called, we're ready. Okay, let's go. That's what we're so supposed to be about. Rather than sitting staring at the phone saying, I know it's going to ring. I know it's going to ring. You know what? It's going to ring tomorrow. I did the math. It's tomorrow. No, go be ready. Just live your life as your go bag. Hope that helps. What a strange illustration. But he's got another one. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. This will sound familiar because Jesus was like a lot of other people, and that is sometimes he would tell versions of the same story more than once. I don't know why people can't get that. And they'll go, oh, this is just the same story, but it's a little different. Must be a contradiction or an error. No, we tell stories. To one, he gave 5 talents of money. A talent, people always want to know how much it's worth. Probably in 2024, something like $1,500, which a lot of money, you know. And well, really, no, how can I put this? It was a lot of money. That's just what I'm going to say. It's just a lot of money. Okay, who cares if it was 5 years' wages or whether it was 5 weeks' wages? It's a lot of money. To another, 2 talents. To another, 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who'd received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. Now, this should sound very familiar to us. We've heard this story before. So let's move on. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you've entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. Come, share your master's happiness. Then the man who'd received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you've not sown, gathering where you've not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. Now, by the way, some people want to do that with the church. They'll say, what we need to do is go back to the original church, do it exactly like that. Don't let any changes happen to it and just hand it right back to God. We're all to grow. We're all to change. We're all to put things at risk and grow them. That's what we're supposed to do. I used to carry a quote in my wallet until my wallet had been washed too many times and gotten soaked by me being in the water too many times. And that quote said, the chief danger in life is that a man will take too many precautions. Sometimes you need to risk it. You need to step out. It was risky asking Miss Cammie out on a date. It was risky. I wasn't from where she lived. I had no connection to her family or her friends. It was a real risk. It was a real risk for her to accept it. I'm very glad I asked her. It was a real risk to put this phone on a tripod. And 4 years ago, almost exactly by the time you're listening to this, 4 years ago, I think our birthday is November 10th. 4 years ago, it was a risk to not have a job, to not have a church, but to set this up on a rainy, stormy Wednesday night and say, let's do something different. Let's start a church for everybody, everywhere, that doesn't need a building and all those bills and doesn't need a huge staff and all of those. And most people gave us 0 odds. In fact, quite frankly, I didn't think it would last more than a few months. Certainly not after COVID, when people would turn around and go back to their churches. And yet we continue to grow. That's God taking our loaves and fishes and doing stuff with it. It's not us doing it, it's Him. There's no question. But again, it would never have happened if we hadn't have taken the risk. I had jobs on offer, and a couple of them are really good jobs. And I seriously considered going that way, but I said, let's risk this first. And a lot of people encouraged me to do that, by the way. Had it been me on my own, I don't think I would have done it. But they really encouraged me. So credit goes out to many people and to Almighty God. But you see what happened with the risk? God rewarded taking the risk. Well, his master is not happy that this guy did not take the risk. He says, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I've not sown and gather where I've not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him, give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. And whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus is saying, where's your go bag? Where's your life? What have you done? Now, I don't want to throw guilt on anybody out there. That's not the point of this. I don't want you sitting there going, well, I haven't really done great things with my life. The question is this: did you love God? Did you love your neighbors as yourself? If you haven't, start. We're not talking about doing a big, great thing like starting an Our Safe Harbor or starting an IBM or an X or sending rockets up to Mars. No. Your intentional kindness and love toward others is your business. That's your job. Let's profess Christ in the day by day. That will bear interest. I get emails, not often, but every so often, from people that thank me for a profound influence I've had on their lives. I don't remember them. Most I do, but you know what I mean. Some I don't remember at all. And yet, somehow, a connection has been made. Other times, I'll talk to people who will say, because of you, I did this, and then this happened. And they'll tell me stories of how God has blessed them loving somebody. I love those stories. Share those stories. Those are good stories. But I hope you see now, instead of staring at the phone or the skies, go do what you're supposed to do. Remember, it's not going to be long here where the apostles are going to see Jesus ascend, and they're staring around, staring at the skies, wondering when he's coming back. And the angels are saying, why are you doing that? Do what he told you to do. There you go. I hope you've enjoyed this. We're going to stop there and go into one of my favorite passages next week. I hope that you've had a great November. Please share this, subscribe. It helps us a lot to be found by people who are looking for this. The more number of subscribers and sharers, the more Google pays attention to us and bumps up the rating, and people start searching for us. They actually find us. Thank you for those of you that can give and that have given. You've allowed us to make 4 years now.